Every day, when you come to work at a grain, feed, or processing facility, whether large or small, start your shift by focusing on your personal safety, because your safety matters. Providing a safe, healthy working environment is a top priority of the grain, feed, and processing industry and your company. You play an important part in achieving that goal. This training program provides important information on potential workplace hazards and ways you can protect yourself. Our industry has made a lot of progress since the late 1970s in reducing fires and explosions at grain, feed, and processing facilities. Safe work practices have been one of the major reasons why. If you have the key elements of fuel, oxygen, and an ignition source, the result would be a fire. If this combination of elements occurs in an enclosed or confined area, such as a grain bin, an explosion would likely occur. Since there isn't much you can do about the oxygen in the air or confinement, your efforts should focus on removing fuel and controlling or eliminating ignition sources. Let's first discuss controlling the principal fuel source: grain dust. By controlling grain dust, we can significantly reduce the possibility of explosions. Even though your facility may have mechanical equipment to help control grain dust, the first line of defense in keeping your facility clean includes using a broom and a shovel. Your facility has a housekeeping program customized for its operation and design features. Since dust emissions can vary from day to day and area to area, your supervisor will determine priority housekeeping areas that need to be either cleaned first or more frequently. Another common housekeeping method is using compressed air. However, since it creates a dust cloud, it should be strictly controlled and should be used only if authorized by your supervisor. This includes shutting down and locking out all equipment in the area and removing any potential ignition sources. During a blowdown with compressed air, give consideration to both eye and respiratory protection. Other cleaning procedures may involve either vacuuming or washdown. However, don't employ these methods unless you have been trained on how to properly use them. Whichever method you're instructed to use, clean equipment from the top down. Dust that accumulates on equipment capable of producing heat is to be cleaned off regularly, especially dust that comes in contact with moving parts or bearings. To reduce manual housekeeping and to keep your workplace safe, close bin covers and lids. Make sure enclosed conveyors are kept closed and covers are secured. Always close and secure access panels and doors. And clean up spills as soon as possible. Anytime you notice accumulations of dust or leaking equipment, inform your supervisor immediately. Housekeeping is everyone's job. We're counting on you. If your facility has a mechanical dust collection system, you need to be familiar with its operation and report equipment malfunctions, such as dust billowing out of a dust collector. If you notice dust being released from a dust collector, report the problem immediately. Another method used to control fugitive dust is to pressurize enclosed plant areas. It's important to remember that for pressurization to work effectively, doors, windows, and other openings need to be kept closed. When they do occur, grain dust explosions most often begin with a primary explosion in an enclosed bucket elevator leg, silo, dust collector, or other grain handling equipment. This primary explosion can then set off a series of damaging and potentially devastating secondary explosions. Regardless of where the primary explosion occurs and its magnitude, the pressure waves and vibrations created shake the surrounding area, which causes dust to be dislodged from walls, ledges, and equipment, fueling secondary explosions. The secondary explosions continue until the fuel is consumed or the pressures are relieved. Keeping an elevator clean is an important way to minimize the potential for these secondary explosions. One of the basic tools grain, feed, and processing facilities rely on to not only keep operations running smoothly, but to also protect against fires and explosions is a comprehensive documented preventive maintenance program. These programs include routine inspections, appropriate lubrication, and regularly scheduled maintenance. Key systems and pieces of equipment included in our preventive maintenance program include dust collection systems, bucket elevator legs, dryers, grain stream processing equipment, and conveyors, as well as all critical bearings and drives. Your facility's preventive maintenance program also focuses attention on various monitoring and safety devices. Let's look at some of the things that you can do to help control ignition sources. An obvious ignition source is an open flame or heat from careless smoking. This is why grain, feed, and processing facilities have very strict no smoking rules. Hot work, including cutting and welding, brazing, and sparks from surface grinding, continue to be one of the leading causes of dust explosions. Get approval from your supervisor before any hot work is allowed. Once approval has been obtained, a hot work permit is used for an on-site evaluation of conditions to determine what precautions and controls need to be in place. Key items that the permit covers are cleaning the entire area and removing or protecting all combustible materials, closing off all floor and wall openings, shutting down and locking out all operations in the area, making sure a fire extinguisher is immediately available, and maintaining a fire watch both during and after the hot work. Bucket elevator legs are also a potential ignition source. Inspect and maintain them at regular intervals. Also, be alert for unusual sounds like clanging, banging, or scraping buckets. One of the potential hazardous situations is a choked leg. This means the bucket elevator leg becomes overloaded. When this happens, the boot and lower portions of the leg casing become filled with grain, and the leg belt begins to slow down and could eventually stop, but the motor continues to turn the pulley at normal speeds. This builds up frictional heat, which becomes a potential ignition source. Some facilities monitor the legs using motion detection and alignment devices. It's also important to understand that jogging a leg, repeatedly turning it on and off, is not an appropriate way to solve a choked leg, because it can trigger a fire or explosion. If you suspect a choked leg condition may be developing, immediately shut down the conveying systems feeding the leg as well as the leg and report it. Heat generated from faulty bearings is another potential source of ignition. To reduce heat and prevent premature wear, clean and lubricate them regularly. Bearings need to be checked on a regular basis. If they are hotter than normal, or if they're noisy, report it to your supervisor. Electrical equipment is another potential ignition source. All electrical equipment located inside the plant is specially rated for use in dusty environments. This equipment should be regularly inspected and properly maintained. When it comes to eliminating electrical hazards, there are several things you can do to reduce the risk of a fire and explosion. Remove any dust buildup on electrical motors or other electrical equipment. Never use common electrical tools or appliances inside the plant unless authorized by your supervisor. Make sure all electrical panels are always kept closed. And report any damaged conduit or exposed wiring or missing light globes. Another concern is foreign objects, such as tramp metal entering the grain handling and processing stream. It can be a potential ignition source and damage equipment by causing rubbing and frictional sparks that can ignite grain dust. Our first line of defense against foreign objects is the grate over the receiving pit. If you notice that the grating is damaged, bent, or broken, inform your supervisor right away so it can be repaired or replaced. In some facilities, equipment such as magnets has been installed to remove foreign objects. If you're assigned to clean and inspect these devices, it's a job to be taken seriously. Your supervisor will cover the specifics of how frequently they must be inspected and cleaned. In addition to fire and explosion safety, there are other important safety precautions that need to be taken when working at grain, feed, and processing facilities. One of the most important is when entering a confined space, such as a grain bin, tank, or silo. Occasionally, it's necessary to enter these confined spaces. When doing so, it's essential to identify and control potential hazards and be prepared to respond to an emergency. Do not enter any marked confined space without being properly trained. There are several major hazards associated with confined space entry, which include atmospheric problems, such as a lack of sufficient oxygen in the air, presence of carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, methane gas, or grain pesticides. One other potential atmospheric hazard could be the introduction of toxic chemicals, such as cleaners, adhesives, or other substances. If these are used incorrectly, they can cause adverse health effects. Your operation may also have additional confined spaces not used to store or handle grain that can pose their own unique hazards. Another potential hazard is flowing grain. Let's say you're inside the bin. Suddenly, someone throws a switch to remove some grain or add grain to the bin. Within seconds, you could be drawn under or be covered by the grain and suffocate. To protect yourself from situations like these, you'll be learning about equipment lockout practices later in this program. Another potential concern inside grain storage spaces can be hung up or bridged grain. This is grain that has become clumped together and either forms a solid layer across a bin or attaches itself to the side of the bin. In either case, the grain could collapse, resulting in you being engulfed in grain or injured by chunks of grain falling from the walls. Before entering a confined space, you should fill out a confined space entry permit, which some companies refer to as a bin entry permit, and have it signed by your operation's designated individual. The permit is a checklist to ensure no hazards or safeguards are overlooked, and notifies others about your entry. Permits should be fully completed each and every time an entry is made into a confined space. One of the key items on this permit is evaluating atmospheric conditions that might exist inside the space to be entered. Other specialized equipment may be needed. This can range from a bosun's chair and lifeline used to lower someone into a bin to using a respirator. Safely working in confined spaces requires that at least 2 people are involved: the entrant, who goes into a confined space to do the work, and the attendant, who remains outside the space and continuously monitors the safety of the entrant. In the event of an emergency, the attendant can order the entrant to evacuate from the space or call for help. The attendant should never enter a confined space to rescue the entrant, nor should the attendant ever leave the area for any reason, even to get help while someone is in the space. Instead, the attendant should have a ready means of communication with others in the facility, in case further assistance is necessary. You need to know your company's confined space emergency procedures and strictly follow them. Now let's look at safety when operating equipment. Grain, feed, and processing facilities make use of a variety of powerful equipment. You will need to be trained to know how to safely operate the equipment. All equipment needs to be properly guarded to prevent contact with moving parts. Don't take these guards off or try to defeat their purpose in any way. Your safety depends on them. In the event you must work on equipment, such as for maintenance or adjustment, one of the most effective ways to prevent injuries to yourself and others is to follow your operation's lockout and tag program. Locking out and tagging power machinery and other equipment positively de-energizes it so it can't accidentally be started while you're working on it. Tagging the equipment notifies other employees that the equipment has been shut down and is not to be started. If, for instance, you have to replace a loose bucket in the leg, be sure the power is shut off, locked out, and tagged before beginning your work. The last thing to do before placing your hands or any part of your body onto the equipment is to try to test start the equipment. This ensures the correct equipment is fully and properly locked out, and it is now safe to perform your task. It's important to remember that each person who works on equipment must always lock out and tag each energy disconnect switch, and then try to test start the equipment. Each person who applies a lock and tag should remove each lock personally. Don't remove a lock or tag that someone else has put on. Next, let's look at safety issues that are common to both truck and rail. They include effective communications, personnel accountability, safe work practices, controlling rolling stock, switching rail cars and truck traffic flow, loading and unloading, and fall protection. Learn the skills necessary to communicate with coworkers. For example, radios and hand signals are commonly used when moving rail cars. Know where your coworkers are at all times. When working with trucks, rail cars, or other large equipment, remember that the operator of the equipment may have a blind spot and not be able to see you. Remember that if you cannot see a vehicle's mirrors, the driver cannot see you. When opening and closing rail car hatch covers, slide gates, and end gates, proper body position prevents strains and sprains. Use your legs, not your back, and ask for help when needed. When working on rolling stock, fall protection may be required. Know what's available and how to use it. Pay attention to inclement weather conditions and slippery work surfaces. Look around to know where you're stepping. Falls can happen when working on roofs and other elevated work surfaces without guardrails or ladders. If a task needs to be performed in a location that does not appear to have adequate fall protection, check with your supervisor first before beginning that work. Serious injuries can also occur when a worker falls on a level surface. The elevator has many uneven walking surfaces. Grain, dust, and damp conditions can combine to make floor surfaces very slippery. Winter presents its own set of challenges with ice and snow. It is vital that you always keep these changing conditions in mind and walk both slowly and carefully. There are some things you can do to help prevent slips, trips, and falls. Do your part to keep work areas clean. Good housekeeping practices go a long way toward making sure you keep your feet on the ground. Keep your hand on the railing when climbing up and down stairs. Keep stairs free and clear of other materials or obstructions. If you notice that a stairway or railing has been damaged or is slippery, fix the hazard, or report it to your supervisor so it can be fixed. Ladders are devices frequently used in the workplace to access various types of equipment, material, devices, or platforms at various levels. There are both portable and fixed-type ladders. Fixed ladders are permanently attached to a building or structure. Many of these ladders will have a safety cage or fall restraint device to serve as protection in the event of a fall. Portable ladders can be moved around and should only be used in temporary situations. These ladders come in various types and lengths. The most common portable ladders are straight, extension, and step ladders. While using a ladder, always maintain a 3-point contact with the ladder while climbing. Always keep your belt buckle within the vertical side rails of the ladder. Extending your belt buckle outside that zone increases the danger of a potential fall from the ladder. When you're positioning a portable extension ladder for use, always remember the 4-to-1 rule. For every 4 feet of rise of the ladder, the base should be moved horizontally out 1 foot. This should provide the proper angle for the ladder to be used safely. In addition, extend the ladder at least 3 feet above the upper level. It is also a good practice to tie off the ladder at the upper level or have a coworker hold the ladder while you're climbing. This prevents it from moving while in use. Always use a portable ladder according to the manufacturer's recommendations. Straight or extension ladders should never be used horizontally. Only approved fiberglass ladders should be used near electrical devices. Portable ladders should always be stored properly. Inspect portable ladders before each use to ensure they're in good condition. Make sure the feet are in place and in good working order. The rungs are clean and dry, and the side rails are not cracked or bent. Your facility may have one of several different means of moving employees from one floor to the next. These include continuous belt man lifts, manually operated platform lifts, and caged man lifts, which are similar to a small passenger elevator. The following rules apply to each type of man lift. Be trained before operating. Be aware of the type of safety devices on your man lifts. Know the man lift's weight capacity and don't exceed it. And don't override interlocks. In addition to these rules, each man lift type has special requirements. Continuous belt man lifts require that you use 2 hands to hold on. Do not carry tools and equipment. Know what floor you are on and be prepared to dismount on or before the top floor. Manually operated platform lifts require that safety gates or chains be in place and proper counterweights be used. Never use any type of man lift without specific training. Now, let's look at ways to control electrical hazards, beyond those we've already discussed concerning dust explosions. Because the human body is an excellent conductor of electricity, any contact should be avoided. Electrical hazards are sometimes easy to overlook. For this reason, electrical repair work at your facility should be performed only by well-trained, qualified, and authorized employees. Do not attempt to perform any electrical repairs yourself. Even the simple act of opening an electrical panel can be dangerous and should be done with safety in mind. Use only portable electrical tools that are either 3-prong grounded or double insulated. Do not use a tool or cord with a missing or broken ground prong. If a tool becomes hot or starts to spark, stop using it and remove it from service. Check extension cords before use. Do not use an extension cord that is cut or has been taped, has damaged insulation, or has exposed wires. When using cords in a wet or damp area, make sure they are protected with a ground fault circuit interrupter. When outside, always be mindful of overhead power lines. Next, let's discuss personal protective equipment, commonly referred to as PPE. Head protection is PPE designed to protect your head from trauma. The most common types of head protection are hard hats and bump caps. Eye protection is PPE designed to protect your eyes in the workplace. The most common types are safety glasses, goggles, and face shields. The type of eye protection needed will depend on the environment in which you work and the activity you're involved in. Hearing protection is PPE designed to protect and conserve your hearing in the workplace. The most common types are earplugs, which can be found in disposable and reusable types, and earmuffs. Respirators are worn to protect against air contaminants such as dust. The most common respirator is a disposable dust mask which should not be shared with anyone else. Other types of respirators may be used in special circumstances, but require more training. There are various types and styles of gloves that can be worn in the workplace for hand protection. As with other PPE, the appropriate type of glove you wear depends on the working environment and the material or substance with which you work. Special precautions should be taken when wearing gloves around running equipment. Make sure you wear an appropriate boot or shoe for the type of environment you'll be working in. Soles should be non-skid. Safety toe boots or shoes are another option that your supervisor may require. Regardless of the type of PPE required in your workplace, follow the manufacturer's recommendations. Your supervisor will instruct you on the type of PPE that is appropriate in your workplace and where it is required. All chemical substances can be hazardous. Broad categories of hazardous chemicals include those which are flammable, corrosive, toxic, or reactive. Grain facilities are commonly diversified and may include chemicals such as herbicides, pesticides, dry and liquid fertilizers, and bulk fuels. And grain processing facilities may use chemicals such as chlorine and hexane to process grain and oilseed and manufacture ethanol. Labeling and other information from the manufacturer will explain the appropriate use of the product and the proper safety precautions to follow. When handling chemicals, always be sure to read and follow the product labeling prior to use. Every chemical at your facility will have a material safety data sheet, also known as an MSDS, or other document which will give you more complete information for the substance, such as chemical precautions, required PPE, spill cleanup and disposal, and emergency procedures. Your supervisor will instruct you on how to access MSDSs at your location and any specific chemical hazard associated with your job. Not everyone is allowed to handle all chemicals. The use of certain pesticides and fumigants, for example, may be restricted to those who have been specially licensed. Using these substances without training is dangerous. For your own safety, avoid handling and other exposures to chemicals until you have received specific safety training. If an accident occurs, report work-related injuries or illnesses immediately to your supervisor. If not properly cared for, some minor injuries could become more serious. Also, injury or near-miss incidents should be investigated to determine the cause and prevent reoccurrence, or worse yet, a more serious incident. Every facility has an emergency action plan to ensure you know how to respond to emergency situations. Examples of such emergencies include fire and explosion, injury or illness, and severe weather. Depending on the type of emergency, your facility will have alarms or other methods of notification. When notified, you need to know how to respond and where to gather. Your supervisor will provide you with the details of the facility's emergency action plan. The security of your facility is important to protect you, your coworkers, non-employees, and the products you handle. Everyone plays an integral role in the facility's security plan. You may receive additional materials, training, procedures, and policies from your company. Be sure to review these as they will contain information important to your safety and well-being. If you have any questions about policies, procedures, or training materials, ask your supervisor. At the end of the day, take the principles you've learned here home with you. You are our most important asset, and your safety matters.